Basic Terminology of Nichiren Shoshu, Video 4.
5 practices, Goshu Hoshi. This term signifies the 5 ways of Buddhist practice expounded in the Teachers of the Law, Hoshi, 10th chapter of the Lotus Sutra. It also refers to the persons who perform these practices. A passage from the Teachers of the Law chapter reads, "If one embraces, reads, recites, expounds, and transcribes even one phrase of the Lotus Sutra, this person shall inevitably be able to attain Buddhahood in his or her future lifetime." Hokekyo, page 319 to 320. The 5 practices are embracing, to accept and uphold the true law and the Lotus Sutra; reading, to look at and recite the sutra; reciting, to recite the sutra from memory; teaching, to understand the significance of the sutra and to teach it to others; transcribing, to transcribe the sutra. In quote, "the real aspect of the Gohonzon," unquote, Nichiren Daishonin states, all 5 practices are contained in embracing the Lotus Sutra and chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Gosho, page 1389. The Daishonin elucidates that, in the latter day of the law, the practice of embracing the Lotus Sutra, which means to embrace the Daigohonzon of the 3 great secret laws, contains all of the 5 practices. To be more specific, for the people of the latter day of the law, the 5 practices are not performed separately. There is only one Buddhist practice, receiving and believing in the Gohonzon and chanting Daimoku. This is the practice of embracing the true law, which, in the latter day of the law, encompasses all of the 5 practices. Fivefold Comparison, Goju Sotai. This is the ranking system established by Nichiren Daishonin to demonstrate the superiority of the Buddhism of the Soin over all other teachings. This doctrine is elucidated in the, quote, opening of the eyes, unquote, Kaimoku Sho, and other Goshos. Religions and teachings from shallow to deep are compared at 5 levels. The 5 levels of comparison are: comparison between Buddhist and non-Buddhist teachings; comparison between Mahayana and Hinayana Buddhism; comparison between the Lotus Sutra and the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings; comparison between the essential teaching and the theoretical teaching; comparison between the Buddhism of the sowing and the Buddhism of the harvest. Follow the law, not a person. Eho Fui Nin. This principle is the first of the 4 standards of practice that Buddhists must follow, as expounded in the Nirvana Sutra. This standard emphasizes the importance of following the true teachings as expounded by the Buddha and not relying upon the interpretations of learned scholars and priests who study the teachings. In the, quote, opening of the eyes, unquote, Kaimoku Sho, Nichiren Daishonin discusses a passage from the Nirvana Sutra. Our compassionate Father, the Buddha, spoke these final words at Sal Grove: "Follow the teaching and not a person," unquote. Even of Bodhisattva universally worthy, Fugen, or Manjushri, preaches on the teachings. If he does not have the sutra in hand, you must not follow him. Gosho, page 558. Therefore, even if a doctrine is taught by a bodhisattva, one must not follow any teaching that is not centered on the sutras of the Buddha. 4 kinds of lands. Shido. These are the 4 kinds of lands expounded by the great teacher Tien Tai. The land of enlightened and unenlightened beings, a land in which common mortals from the 6 paths live together with people of learning and realization, 2 vehicles, bodhisattvas and the Buddha. The land of expedience, a land inhabited by men of learning and realization and bodhisattvas who carry out the practice of understanding the principle of emptiness, non-substantiality, through the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. They have eradicated the first of the 3 categories of illusion, the illusions of thought and desire. However, they have not yet eradicated the illusions as numerable as particles of dust and sand and the illusions of fundamental darkness. The land of actual reward without obstacle, a land inhabited by bodhisattvas who have partially attained a correct understanding of the principle of the middle way. People living in the land adorned with the Buddha's true enlightenment are able to practice Buddhism with no mental or physical hindrances. The land of eternally tranquil light, a land inhabited by the Buddha who manifests the three virtues of the property of the law, wisdom, and emancipation. The pre-Lotus Sutra teachings and the theoretical teaching taught that each land existed separately in accordance with people's life conditions. However, the lifespan, Juryo, 16th chapter of the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra revealed that the Buddha has eternally resided in this Saha world since the inconceivably remote past. This is proof that this Saha world, which had been referred to as a defiled place, is the eternal land where the Buddha dwells. 4 powers. This term refers to the 4 types of power that enable one to attain Buddhahood in one's present form. They are: the power of the Buddha refers to that of the true Buddha, Nichiren Daishonin, and is inherent within the Gohonzon. The power of the law is that of Myoho Renge Kyo, which is vast and profound and is also inherent within the Gohonzon. The power of faith is devout belief in the Gohonzon. The power of practice is the chanting of Daimoku to the Gohonzon for oneself and for others. 26 High Priest Nichikan Shonin discussed the relationship between these powers in his exegesis on the, quote, true object of worship, unquote, Kanji no Honzon Sho Mondan. He stated that the people will be able to develop the powers of faith and practice through the power of the law inherent within the Gohonzon. The power of the Buddha will respond to the people's power of faith and practice. This will enable them to attain Buddhahood in their present form. 4 stages of faith and 5 stages of practice, Shishin Gohon. These are the stages of faith and practice that are attained by the practitioners and are expounded in the Distinction of Benefits, 17th chapter of the Lotus Sutra. There are 4 stages of faith that are attained by hearing the Buddha's preaching of the lifespan, Juryo, 16th chapter, during Shakyamuni's lifetime, while there are 5 stages of practice that are attained by listening to the sermons on the lifespan chapter after Shakyamuni's passing. The 4 stages of faith during the Buddha's lifetime are: a single moment of faith and understanding, the initial stage of faith in which one develops belief in the Lotus Sutra even though one does not yet understand it well enough to teach others; a general understanding of the Buddha's teaching, the second stage where one gains a basic understanding of the Buddha's teachings; widespread propagation of the Buddha's teachings, the third stage, where one hears and understands the Buddha's teaching and preaches the law to others; perfection of the observation of the mind with deep faith, the last stage, where one deeply takes faith in the Buddha's teaching, practices the observation of the mind in addition to the previous 3 stages, and finally becomes enlightened to the truth. The 5 stages of practice after the Buddha's passing are: rejoicing on first hearing the Lotus Sutra, the first stage where one rejoices upon hearing the Buddha's teachings; reading and reciting the sutra, the second stage where one actually embraces, reads, and recites the sutra; propagating the sutra to others, the third stage where one preaches to others the Buddha's teaching that he has embraced, read, and recited; practicing the 6 paramitas while embracing the sutra, the fourth stage where one practices the observation of the mind in order to realize the truth of the Lotus Sutra while practicing the 6 paramitas of giving, observing the precepts, forbearance, assiduousness, meditation, and wisdom; carrying out the 6 paramitas as the primary practice. The 5th stage, where one finally becomes enlightened to the true meaning of the Buddhist teaching, and one purely practices the 6 paramitas as the primary practice. 4 stages of rise and fall. This is one of the standards used to judge the superiority and profundity of all the Buddhist teachings. The 4 stages are the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings, the theoretical teaching, the essential teaching, and the teaching of the observation of the mind. The original source of this doctrine is the 2nd volume of the Profound Meaning of the Lotus Sutra, Hokeki Gengi, written by the great teacher Tien Tai. The Daishonin expounds the doctrine of the 4 stages of rise and fall in the Gosho, quote, on the 10 worlds, unquote, as follows. When all the Buddhist teachings are viewed from the perspective of the principle of observing one's mind taught in the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra, when the theoretical teaching had its rise, the pre-Lotus teachings died out. When the essential teachings were preached, both the theoretical teaching and the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings fell. When the teaching of the observation of the mind came into existence, all the previous teachings, the essential teaching, the theoretical teaching, and the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings were all extinguished. Gosho, page 176. Quote, the principle of observing one's mind taught in the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra, unquote, refers to the sole essential teaching of the Buddhism of the Soin, hidden in the depths of the lifespan Juryo's 16th chapter of the Lotus Sutra. The 26th High Priest Nichikan Shonin states in the Exegesis on the True Object of Worship, in quote, on the 10 worlds, unquote, Nichiren Daishonin revealed the 4 stages of rise and fall. The 4th state, the observation of the mind, unlike the conventional interpretations, is so named based on the correct viewpoint of the doctrine of the Buddhism of the Soin, hidden in the depths of the Juryo chapter of the Lotus Sutra. From this standpoint, the doctrine of the Buddhism of the Soin is deemed as the observation of the mind. Then, the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings, the theoretical teaching, and the essential teaching on the whole are categorized as the doctrinal study of the sutras. Mondan, page 193. Once the Buddhism of the 3 great secret laws is preached, the doctrines of the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings, the theoretical teaching, and the essential teaching are all merged into the teachings of the observation of the mind that is concealed in the depths of the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra. 14 Slanders, Jushihio. This term refers to the 14 kinds of slander that go against the true law. The true law means the Lotus Sutra among Shakyamuni's sutras, lifetime teachings, and the latter day of the law. It signifies the 3 great secret laws that were propagated by Nichiren Daishonin. A passage from the Parable Hiyu 3rd chapter of the Lotus Sutra states, if a person fails to have faith but instead slanders this sutra, when his life comes to an end, he will enter into the Avicii hell. Hokekyo, page 175. The Lotus Sutra Watson, page 74. In annotations on the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra, Hokeki Mongu Ki, the great teacher Miyalo interprets this passage, listing 14 kinds of slander as evil causes. They are the so-called 14 slanders. Citing Miyalo's interpretation, Nichiren Daishonin states in the Gosho, quote, reply to Lord Matsuno, unquote, these 14 slanders are equally applicable to the priesthood and laity. We should greatly fear the consequences of committing such slanders. Gosho, page 1046. The 14 slanders are arrogance, which is to be conceited and thus to think lightly of the true law. Negligence, which is to be negligent of one's Buddhist practice. arbitrary egotistical judgment, which is to interpret the true law based on one's own erroneous thoughts and ideas and to adhere to one's self-centered views. Shallow, self-satisfied understanding, which is to judge the true law based on one's own shallow knowledge without making efforts to deepen one's understanding. Attachment to earthly desires, which is to be focused on one's earthly desires without seeking the true law. Lack of understanding without a seeking spirit, which is to be lacking in understanding of the true law. Disbelief, which is not believing in the true law. Aversion, which is to frown or scowl at the true law. Deluded doubt, which is to be confused about and doubtful of the true law. Vilification, which is to speak ill of the true law. Contempt, which is to despise those who believe in the true law. Hatred, which is to hate those who believe in the true law. Jealousy, which is to envy or be jealous of those who believe in the true law. Grudges, which is to harbor resentful feelings towards those who believe in the true law. Nichiren Daishonin teaches in the Gosho, quote, Nembutsu leads to the hell of incessant suffering, unquote, that the root cause of the 14 slanders lies in disbelief in the Gohonzon. From the cause of practice to the effect of Buddhahood, and from the true effect of Buddhahood to the true cause of practice. Juin Shika Juka Koin. Based on the viewpoint of the infinite past of Kuan Ganjo, the Buddha who is identified in the principle, quote, from the true effect of Buddhahood to the true cause of practice, unquote, is superior to the Buddha who is identified in the principle, quote, from the cause of practice to the effect of Buddhahood, unquote. Both refer to the same Buddha of 500 myriad dust particle kalpas ago, who attained enlightenment in the inconceivably remote past. Shakyamuni's Buddhism of the harvest is based on the principle, quote, from the cause of practice to the effect of Buddhahood, unquote. The Daishonin's Buddhism of the sowing, however, is based on the principle, quote, from the true effect of Buddhahood to the true cause of practice, unquote. Shakyamuni, who made his advent in India, began to practice asceticism at the age of 19 and attained enlightenment at 30. Thereafter, he taught the 4 teachings of doctrine, the Tripitaka teaching, shared teaching, distinct teaching, and perfect teaching. Finally, he expounded the lifespan Juryo's 16th chapter of the Lotus Sutra and revealed his attainment of Buddhahood in the inconceivably remote past of 500 myriad dust particle kalpas ago. This is the principle, quote, from the cause of practice to the effect of Buddhahood, unquote. However, the cause of the Buddha's enlightenment in the inconceivably remote past that was expounded in the surface meaning of the lifespan chapter was, in reality, derived from the true cause of the true Buddha in the form of a common mortal in the infinite past of Kuan Ganjo. Thus, this true effect of the Buddha's enlightenment, 500 myriad dust particle kalpas ago, points to the original true cause in the infinite past of Kuan Ganjo. This is the principle, quote, from the true effect of Buddhahood to the true cause of practice, unquote. The Buddha who was revealed in Shakyamuni's Buddhism of the harvest is the provisional Buddha who attained enlightenment in the age of 500 myriad dust particle kalpas ago, based on the standpoint of the original true cause of the true Buddha of the infinite past of Kuan Ganjo. Fusion of objective reality and subjective wisdom, Kyochi Myogo. Quote, reality, unquote, refers to the object one observes, and, quote, wisdom, unquote, refers to the subjective wisdom that gives one the ability to correctly understand this reality. The, quote, fusion of objective reality and subjective wisdom, unquote, refers to the state of the practitioner in which he sees without any confusion that the objective reality and subjective wisdom are fused in complete accord with each other. The great teacher Tentai stated in Words and Phrases of the Lotus Sutra Hokeki Mongu, when reality and wisdom are fused in harmony, this constitutes the law of causality. Mongo, page 128. In other words, the fusion of reality and wisdom refers to the state of attaining Buddhahood in one's present form, when the reality of all phenomena in the universe is fused in harmony with the wisdom of the practitioner. At that instant, the practitioner's single moment of existence manifests the wisdom to perceive the law of causality. In, quote, the teaching affirmed by all Buddhas of the three existences, unquote, Nichiren Daishonin expounded on the fusion of reality and wisdom of the true Buddha in the infinite past of Kuon-Ganjo as follows. Prior to the time of 500 myriad dust particle kalpas ago, when Shakyamuni Buddha was a common mortal, he realized that his body was composed of the 5 elements of earth, water, fire, wind, and space, and he instantly attained enlightenment. Gosho, page 1419. Regarding this passage, the 26th High Priest Nichikan Shonin explained that, quote, realize, unquote, refers to the wisdom of the true Buddha, and, quote, his body was composed of the 5 elements of earth, water, fire, wind, and space, unquote, refers to the reality of the true Buddha. In other words, the original state of the true Buddha is the fusion of the objective reality and subjective wisdom of the Buddha in the form of a common mortal in the infinite past of Kuon-Ganjo. The fusion of objective reality and subjective wisdom is the original life condition of the true Buddha of the latter day of the law, Nichiren Daishonin. Nichiren Daishonin manifested this original life condition of the fusion of objective reality and subjective wisdom in the form of the Daigo Hanzen of the high sanctuary of the essential teaching. The people in the latter day of the law are able to receive the great benefit of attaining Buddhahood in their present form by chanting Daimoku with deep faith in the Daigo Hanzen through the function of the fusion of objective reality and subjective wisdom.